Bob we contracted Bob to review the Brown and Caldwell report. Dr. Sonnenberg, on the other hand, was contracted by Florida Department of Environmental Protection, and she has agreed to speak a little bit on her experience. And Lucy, thanks for coming out tonight. It's her husband Rick's birthday, so let's welcome. Happy birthday, Rick.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for being here, and thank you very much, Neil and Jimmy, for allowing me the opportunity.
How's that? It works better on me. What I said was he's 39. He has been for the last 20 years. But I wanted to thank you for the opportunity to speak to you tonight. I want to thank Neil and Jimmy for giving me the opportunity to talk to you as well. I'd like to take a couple minutes to introduce myself to you and explain why I'm standing up here talking to you. And then I'd like to give you a brief summary about some of the key points that I found in some of the work I did with Department of Environmental Protection in regard to the Georgia-Pacific Black Mill. I'm a research professor at Jacksonville University, and I'm the director of the Miller-Wilson Lab for Chemical Research there at JU. I was asked by DEP toward the end of 2009 to assist them in evaluating strategies proposed by GP and their contractors to improve wastewater quality, and also to do that in the context of improving the quality of Weiss Creek as well as the St. Johns River main stem. I believe I was asked to do that because of my education as an environmental science and engineering, my experience in the pulp and paper industry, as well as my work on Weiss Creek and the St. Johns River contaminants in particular. What that entailed, that review entailed, was looking at nearly 30 documents written by both GP and its contractors, and also some by Department of Environmental Protection. And the purpose of those evaluations was to look at the technical validity of what was being said, as well as the breadth and scope of what was being addressed. So, what that also entailed was attending, reading all these documents, attending many of the meetings between the company and the agency, and submitting, sorry about that, and also submitting numerous documents to DEP, reviewing the technical aspects of the GP information. Before I get into my brief summary of the final report that I submitted to them in last June, I'd like to point out to you that while I was involved in much of the discussion, I was privy to an awful lot of information, it certainly wasn't all of it that is available to GP and DEP. And in addition, I've been told that there has been a lot of activity, or at least some activity, regarding some of the issues that I'll be talking to you about in just a moment, very recently. So, with that caveat, I'd like to outline 5 very general key points that came to light during my review of not only the Brown and Caldwell reports, and it was a series of reports, but also a number of other reports submitted by GP. First, information. In that body of work, and there was a whole lot of work, Neil was absolutely right. The creek has been studied, the mill has been studied, between the actual manufacturing and treatment process and environmental science itself. It's extremely complex. But despite all the study, there really are significant information gaps that remain. In particular, they seem to focus on the wastewater characteristics, technical information about the wastewater that would seem to be very necessary to make sound management decisions, thank you, for what you do with that wastewater. Now, as an environmental scientist and engineer, as Bob can tell you, that you never know, you never have all of your questions answered. All questions about all things are never answered. You can never get rid of all of your uncertainty anytime you are addressing an environmental problem. And oftentimes you're asked to move forward on an action without complete information. This is understood among technical people and engineers. However, in this body of work, I felt that there was significant information that was lacking. It was information that's answerable, and it was information that was directly relevant to, again, making sound decisions about effective management of this wastewater. It wasn't, the information gaps were not focused on any particular parameter, chronotox, color, conductivity, and some others that were looked at, but it seemed to be fairly widespread. Secondly, speaking a little bit to Bob's MRI analogy, it was a little disturbing to see the emphasis on treatment only of whole effluent. Now, there were some options that were presented that looked at a single stream of waste. Now, I need to give you a little bit of background. As you may gather, in that huge mill, there are a number of different processes that are being undergone in manufacture of food. Each one of those manufacturing segments produces a certain type of wastewater. And then these wastewaters are put into sewers, and then at some point these sewers are combined to create this whole effluent. Well, the major thrust of the investigations performed primarily by Brown and Caldwell that I'm discussing now, were focusing on that whole effluent. And that really did not take advantage, I think, of a more feasible strategy, and one that the pulp and paper industry itself is fairly familiar with. And that is taking a low volume, high concentration stream of fewer contaminants and try to treat that economically and feasibly. That's much easier to do than, as Bob suggested, you combine all of them together, you have this massive volume, and you have many, many different types of contaminants. So I felt that that was an avenue that could have been more further pursued, that was not, and that weakened the analysis. Excuse me. Third, innovation. I believe that Brown and Caldwell did what they were asked to do, in that proven technologies in the industry, the pulp and paper industry, on a full mill scale that have been applied for over 10 years, those were the technologies that were examined. And what that means is it almost precluded any ability to look at really innovative, very creative, or even non-standard applications of current technology. And I thought that they lost an opportunity also to do that. Fourth, let's see, I think that's fourth. I think there was too much emphasis, at least initially, in my involvement with this project, which lasted about 1.5 years. There was too much emphasis on trying to find a silver bullet. And again, from a technical standpoint, that's really not feasible. You have these different sewers in this waste in the mill. Because again, they create different types of problems. They have to be addressed differently and separately. And it was fairly unrealistic to assume that there was going to be one treatment strategy that would eliminate all of the problems that the mill is facing in their efforts to clean up the wastewater. So I have to point out, though, that about halfway through some of the discussions, that Brown and Caldwell, as a result of questions and urging by the agency and myself, they began to try to find sequential treatments, so that if you have treatment A, and then, oh, by the way, you do treatment B a little bit later, can that get the levels of these contaminants down to acceptable levels? And they did try to address this. So this is highly complex, and it's not a difficult task to do. However, I felt like they could have addressed that in a little more detail, and the recognition, again, that there was not going to be a single strategy to solve these problems. It just was not going to exist. Finally, the legacy compounds. There really was, in all of the documentation in the body of work, after DEP ordered the high volume sampling study, after Georgia Pacific on their own analyzed the solids in their wastewater, found very high level of dioxins in there, there was a fairly superficial treatment of what to do about that. And in my opinion, that really remains a problem today. And furthermore, in my work with investigating contaminants in Rice Creek, along with St. John's River Water Management District, we see that Rice Creek does have a lot of contamination in it. We don't know the sources of that contamination. We have not, because it's not really been studied. But obviously, the mill is sort of the elephant on the creek. That's the first place you would think to look. And so the mill's been discharging since 1940s, and as Neil says, they've improved their act just enormously, just in the last 10 years, not to mention since the 40s. But what that doesn't tell us is whether or not any other legacy compounds still exist in those solids. And that concerns me a great deal, particularly if there's not going to be substantial efforts into trying to identify any other potential contaminants, nor do a significant activity to remove all possibilities of their being discharged. I would like to point out to you that these are very general observations and an awful lot of documents and an awful lot of technical details. I would be happy to provide the report to you, the final report to you, and any other supporting information you would like. If you email me, I've got a card here, you can contact me later. But with that, I'll turn that over to Neil.